Good morning, comrades. You are listening to WHIV-LP New Orleans 102.3. This is your weekly Good Morning Comrade. Welcome to the show, of course, our friend, multiple-time guest. We just can't get enough of the folks around here. It is the one, the only, the incomparable Lauren Jewett, folks. What's going on?
Hi. Wow, what an introduction. So you can't get enough of me. I guess I can't get enough of running for office.
That's right. Well, this time we're running also for District 1, Congressional District 1 in Congress against our look. We know him. We love him. Steve Scalise, right?
Yeah.
We're in District 1 Congress. How you doing there, Lauren? What's going on?
I'm doing great. Thank you for inviting me on the show once again, as a current candidate for office in the state that we love, Louisiana.
Love Louisiana. I was just telling you off air before we got started. I made my first pot of gumbo just today before we got started, just because it's getting to that part of the year, and we got to watch the Saints get absolutely destroyed. So you know what happens.
Aw, yeah.
So tell us about it. So you're running for Congress this time. What's going on?
Yeah. Also for the people who are listening that are new and don't know much about me, my name's Lauren Jewett. I am a national board certified public school special education teacher. I've been in the classroom for 17 years and I work in Orleans Parish, but I reside in Metairie in Jefferson Parish. And I am a candidate for Louisiana's first congressional district. I will be running in the Democratic primary, which is supposed to take place on April 18th of 2026, but that will potentially be moved, and we can get into that later with the special session happening currently. But I am running in this race because I really believe that this district deserves somebody who has a history of documented public service, who advocates for our most vulnerable populations. And I really feel that at this time, a lot of our District 1, is facing a lot of vulnerable situations. There's a disregard for the way that our democratic principles are upheld when we think about the Constitution. And we have a lot of policy decisions that are going to result in cuts to healthcare, cuts to SNAP and food programs that we know our children rely on, cuts to education that we are already seeing happening right before our eyes, special education cuts have just happened in the last 2 weeks to OSEP, which is the Office of Special Education Programming. And then just also cuts state and federally that are going to impact our environment and our coast. And so I've spent almost 2 decades advocating for vulnerable students and children, and I'm going to bring that experience to help advocate for people who don't feel like they have a voice in DC and in Congress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, the way that we sort of like look at how, Congress has been, there's very few teachers that are involved in there. There are very few educators, and there really does need to be more of a voice of that, because they are the people who talk to children. They understand their communities, and they feel like I said this a lot when I was a teacher, like living conditions, not just in the immediate sense, but also in the sort of like more cultural sense. Those are working conditions for people, for especially when it comes to a student who can't, who is essentially not homeless, or they have food scarcity, or they have other issues. They have to learn in those conditions as well. And it really is something that's not really taken a part of in the way that we sort of think. If a student is essentially like targeted by immigration, or whatever, they're not going to trust parts. That's one part of the government, and the education system is another part of government. Why would they trust teachers if their parents are, or they themselves are essentially a target of for deportation? So it really is something that needs to be brought into this this perspective more broadly. And I really do appreciate you stepping up for that, Lauren.
Yeah, I think, and and maybe some of the listeners know who are familiar with me that I have run for office before. I ran 3 years ago for the local school board in Jefferson Parish, and made it pretty far into a runoff by only 10 votes. And so, votes do matter. We talk about that a lot. People think
10 votes. That's so crazy. It's so crazy.
no, and people say their vote doesn't count, and I think it truly does.
It so does.
Like I tell that story so many times because, I mean, that's just 5 houses on a block with 2 voters, and or even less households would have more voters. So, I ran for that position, and then I stepped up the next year, ran for the state school board, Bessie, here in Louisiana, and I think I always of the mindset that it's important to have an educator's perspective on those school boards, state and local. Doesn't mean that every individual on that board has to have had education classroom experience, but I think it is essential that you have at least a good balance of that. And running in those races, I always was looking at things from a macro level, but what we can do on those boards, and it's very centered around curriculum, instruction, like those kinds of, that's what's in our purview. Like, what is it that we actually have ability to make policy on? And I just was looking at what was happening in the last few months and seeing that these issues have just gotten bigger now. The issues have gotten worse and extended beyond the walls of the classroom, which I've always been running on. I ran on mental health. I ran on ensuring that our teachers also have a quality of life that extends beyond their workday. But now it's bigger. It's my students not getting essential nutrition. It's my students being anxious and concerned that they will be separated from their families or be separated from their classmates. It's their families worried if they are going to be able to afford going to the doctor to treat a small medical concern or a big medical concern. And we know, you've been in the classroom too, that a lot of our students are sometimes cared for by other family members, maybe a grandparent or a grandmother or an older aunt or uncle. And so, people who are older rely on programs such as Medicare, Medicaid, and so it's to me, the issues have just grown in magnitude. Our storms are getting stronger. The year before I ran for office, we dealt with Hurricane Ida down here. I had to get a new roof. I had to rebuild parts of my house that had damage. We know that these storms are not getting less stronger. They're getting worse, and just seeing all these things happening, it just really prompted me to feel like this is what has to be done. I just don't know what else to do at this point, but elevate these issues and ensure a quality of life because here in Louisiana, because so many people I know have left or have thought of contemplated leaving Louisiana. And I'm not from here originally, but I've spent most of my adult life here. And people who leave here always say, I miss it. I want to come back. Like, I don't feel attached to the place that I moved to, or I miss it. I want to come back. And it's that kind of, there's dysfunction and some reason of why they left, that whether it's not lots of job opportunities, the natural disasters, the infrastructure, the way that things have worked in the state legislature. Like, there are lots of reasons people have left, and like, we want to make this a place where people can stay, like where there's a future for people. And because, like I said, people leave here and they're like saying that they miss it, that they wouldn't want to be anywhere else, but that there's something that is prompting them to be. It's a push factor away, but then there's something that still calls and pulls, or they come back and visit because some of their families still stay here, or it's this attachment to place. It's this attachment to the culture here, and we have to fight for that culture. And I think what I feel in terms of representation and accessibility from the person who's supposed to fight for us in that way, I don't see that. I see that there's a lot of interplay with what's happening away from Louisiana and what's happening in DC. And I get that you have to establish those networks and those relationships to get things accomplished there. I don't disagree with that, but like also don't make us feel like we have no input of what's happening, because as we know, we have not been able to have any in-person town halls. There has been just people, I think, have been left behind. Like I said in the beginning where I opened, I think there's like a vulnerability here that we're facing, and we are left, like we're feeling left on our own in a sense with all these cuts.
Mm-hmm. I also like want to put another point on that too, is that there is I think it's a quite significant component of fear that is being sort of generated by in our politics more like sort of generally, and I don't even necessarily think that this is like a Democrat Republican thing. I think that there is just sort of a general sense of like, oh, we have this problem with, for example, crime or immigration that is sort of bipartisan, and the solution, at least when it comes to the sort of like establishment consensus of Washington, as you sort of put it a moment ago, is, well, the answer to that is more policing. The answer to that is for the National Guard to intervene and to, take over these cities, or for ICE to come in and to deport all kinds of like folks that are quite frankly just trying to make a living here, regardless of their immigration status. And it's really a situation where it's exacerbating a lot of those factors that you mentioned, not just in Louisiana, but just sort of across the board, and making it more difficult to live everywhere. So I guess you want to speak to that, and I mean, do you even agree with that framing? I guess you could say. I could ask.
Do you mean like the framing that it's difficult to live everywhere?
Well, and that crime and immigration are like two incredibly linked factors, and that they're necessarily even problems in the first place, because that's sort of like the framing that we're seeing out of specifically Washington right
now. Well, I will say that immigration is a very nuanced thing, and everyone has different experiences with how they got here for whatever reason, whether they were leaving their home country and there was conflict, war, they were escaping a bad situation.
Sorry to jump in, but like in many cases, those bad situations that you mentioned were generated or exacerbated by the United States foreign policy. I want to really, really make sure to draw a line under that.
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, our own intervention in foreign policy, where sometimes we're sticking our nose in, and it's creating more instances of conflict. But I mean, there's a reason why people are coming here. I mean, our country is a country of immigrants. Like, and I think people people forget that. People forget that I mean, at least in our region, where we have been devastated by so many types of natural disasters and storms, and it's the people who've rebuilt this city, and is often our immigrants, and
who rebuilt the city, right?
Yes, and are doing jobs that people like, very hard jobs that people tend to not want to sign up to do, and that people aren't thinking about that analysis of that and the path, and that there's got to be a pathway there. And I will say too that what we're seeing now in many states, but I can obviously speak to Louisiana, we're seeing people be disappeared and taken to ICE facilities without due process, or for various reasons. We know people who have spoken up. They're been targeted, or people who are just being profiled. That is happening in different parts of our country, and that is resulting in people who have done all their steps or what they were supposed to do, what they felt they were supposed to do, coming to their check-ins, doing what they were supposed to do. And then it's resulting in people just being sent to these facilities, which are private facilities. We have, I believe, 9 of them in Louisiana. And
you're talking about immigration detention facilities.
The ICE detention facilities that are in Louisiana, and also Alexandria airport has one like there, it's like the biggest hub where people are being picked up. So these sites are also private. So the standards in which they have levels of care for people when it comes to proper food, right? Proper medical care. The standard is not the same as it would have to be in a state prison, which I'm not saying is any better, but I'm just saying because these are privately operated sites, the level of scrutiny and accountability is not there. And we know from groups that have been organizing around this and who have kept in contact with people who are in there, that there are women in these facilities who are also pregnant. There's lots of things that have already been in the news about just the human rights violations that are happening on our own soil. And so when I talked about at the beginning about regard for the Constitution, there's lots of things that are layered there and what I'm advocating for in this race. But we also have to understand about people's due process rights and just in general, just general humanity, that we just a few hours away, right? People are in facilities and, some people are also now self-deporting if they end up getting out, and there's a lot of delays with the process with them going through the court system if they have been picked up. There's a lot of issues there that have nothing to do with something that is maybe related to a crime. And it's important to me that people feel safe, but I think we're creating bigger issues that
it make people less safe even. I'm sorry to interrupt, but this sort of crusade, I guess you could say, against quote unquote crime and linking that to immigration actually creates an environment where people are more precarious and they're in a worse situation. Mm-hmm. That's what in addition to the horrors of the detention facilities and all of these other things, mm-hmm. You're also seeing people, like you say, dissenters or people who just don't fall in line with the sort of framework of what's going on in even the political sort of dictates coming out of either Washington or elsewhere. Mm-hmm. You're seeing that people are being targeted and victimized as a part of that. I'm that's something that's extremely alarming to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's unfortunate, and and I think as an educator, our kids even our youngest are not. They are aware about a lot of these things.
They're so aware. The kids are so smart.
Yeah,
and people don't give them credit for it.
Yeah, and so even just within weeks after the inauguration, or not even weeks, days, having protocol shift around some of these propositions or resolutions that were coming out of the White House about, okay, now schools and churches and courts or those are no longer safe places. And I mean, that directly like was things that we were having to have conversations about, like to only just to add on to what teachers have to do, the millions of things we have to do. So now we have to be vigilant and be trained in what happens if ICE comes to our schools, which we see was happening recently in Chicago, like outside schools. Like, I mean, this has been a huge thing in Chicago. And I know that Chicago is not New Orleans or Louisiana, but like, I think we have to remember that whatever happens in one place is always going to directly impact what's happening in another. Just like what's happening in one part of our state, it's going to have affect us down, from North Louisiana is going to impact us in Southeast Louisiana. So yeah, I think when we think about people being pulled over, picked up by ICE, those people have families, and those people have families with children. That person may be the sole source of income for their family. So now we're leaving somebody with like a family without a source of income. It creates a whole culture.
It's a mess. It's a mess is what it is.
Culture of fear. It's the, I have a lot of feelings about this idea of like the American dream, because we know that concept was always a broken concept for many people, like, because people didn't have access to like home ownership because of redlining and other practices like that just didn't give people a pathway to like wealth. But I think if people are coming here for better opportunity, like let's say that, there is not, or some hope, right? We are doing the opposite of that by like creating this culture of othering and this culture of fear among our neighbors, people who, like I said before, have come here and have rebuilt our city, like, and done
And still doing work. I mean, they're setting up, patrols to make sure that people aren't hanging out at the Home Depot or whatever and attacking them. It's just it's really awful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I guess to sort of like circle around, I mean, you do have a policy platform on your website.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Your sort of vision for Louisiana and for all of this.
Sure. Well, I think, I have, my website is www.laurenjewett.com. And there's lots of things listed on the website, but I think the main things that I am focused on in this race is, of course, education, being an educator myself. And I'll get to that in one moment. And then healthcare, the environment, and our coast, because this is a very coastal district. And we should talk a little bit about what the makeup of the district looks like, because
totally
it might change, but we'll discuss that. And
so many moving parts right now.
So I said education, healthcare, our environment, just being able to have a quality of life, and be able to afford being a person in this country, because we know a lot of people are struggling with that. And lastly, just how are we having any adherence to the Constitution, checks and balances, separation of powers, like the things that we are supposed to be following with our guiding document of our country. So those are the like 5, main things that I find are anchoring. And I've selected those because I think that they affect a lot of people. It does not to say that I don't have interest in other things that are happening to people, because I've been a fighter for a lot of issues that that affect people in our state, whether it's LGBTQ rights. We've talked about immigration, and so those are issues I deeply care about. I also feel like everybody is worried about, can they afford their groceries? Everybody's worried about, can they afford their gas at the gas station? Education, like we have a lot of like, even if you don't have kids, that is going to affect you, because we want to have a well-educated group of people, like eventually serving us and like doing the leading. And we know that like strong education just leads to opportunity for everybody. And the environment, right? Like I've said to many people, like Mother Nature does not look at what letter is next to your name, like for voter registration. Mother Nature is going to roll up the coast and not cherry pick, like
No.
which roof is gonna take off. Like now, obviously we know that, poverty wise, there's racial disparities in where people are living, right? That is definitely a real thing. When we think about environmental,
Who gets hit first, essentially, right?
right. But as our coast erodes, that's going to make these storms move quicker up to areas that are further up that may not have dealt with like catastrophic levels of storms. So again, like I said, what's happening out in Grand Isle or in parts of St. Bernard, like that's going to move up, like, and affect people more prevalent, like more, there's going to be more prevalence for it to affect people. So
first it came for Delacroix, and then it comes for everybody else.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like I went in a lot of different directions, but I want to start first with education because, recently we've had some cuts, but these cuts if we roll back to last year at this time, I was doing like a kind of overview with some folks, reading Project 2025. We each kind of took a chapter because, it was like a 900-page document. I did not personally read all 900 pages, but I kind of did something what you call a jigsaw with people. So each person took a section of it. We read it. We met on Zoom or met and like discussed what were the main points. What did you learn from it? What is going to happen if the election turns out in November in this way? And I took the education chapter, and I read it, and it talked about the Department of Education being defunded, dismantled, and we've seen that happen. And
literally, that was like one of the first things that they did.
And that chapter had a significant amount of information in there about the threats to students with disabilities, and what could happen if the Department of Education was weakened. So we've also seen that happen. So, and I bring that up because those things were kind of coming up in motion, essentially too, when cabinet picks and nominees were being named. And of course we got the nominee. She got confirmed,
Linda McMahon.
Yes, for those of you who don't know, her name is Linda McMahon. She's
the wife of Vince McMahon, who was from the World Wrestling Entertainment. Yeah,
they were also like involved in a lot of like sexual, like there's like sexual allegations.
Oh,
like,
buddy,
the WWE or whatever they're in charge of wrestling organization.
As a longtime wrestling fan, I am fully aware of all.
Yeah, the listeners may not be, but like ultimately, this woman is not qualified to lead the Department of Education. And there were very grave concerns about her being selected, but she is just, to me, a puppet of the Heritage Foundation and all these organizations. I think she was with, I don't remember the name, but she was with this other organization that like is similar in terms of like wanting to privatize everything when it comes to education. And she has made promises saying she's not going to like touch this special education like funding, but she's been pretty silent like recently on what's happening. And so anyway, I of course had concerns as an educator. I'd been watching it pretty closely. I'd been listening to different podcasts, talking to folks in the community. And I remember last year I was listening to something in November, and it just said, if people get it, one of two things could happen, right? The Department of Education could be cut, positions could be cut, and or people are doged, right? People are let go and they're replaced with like cronies and loyalists and people who don't really have a concept of like what's going on or institutional knowledge to do these jobs.
Where loyalty is valued over any kind of understanding of what you're actually doing here.
Because people need to understand, right? People in these Department of Education positions or other other departments. I mean, some of these people have been civil servants and been in these roles for a long time, so they understand how things work. And their one big role that some people have, particularly in the OSEP case, is that they are the people who get the funding from federal government to the states. And I asked this question. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just pause for station ID. You listen to WHIV-LP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. Our guest is Lauren Jewett. She is a congressional candidate for the 1st District in Louisiana. She is running in 2026. The date of that election or primary is forthcoming and very much in flux. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you were making a point about... go ahead.
Yeah. I was making a point about the cuts or the threats to the Department of Education. And so
which can be applied across the board in the rest of the government.
Yeah.
This is one example of what is broadly happening, I guess you could say.
Yes. And I bring that point up because of my profession as a teacher. So I was fortunate, I guess, and I was enough to get in my car one day after school, and I had a number coming through my phone before I drove off, and I picked it up because I actually thought it was a contractor because I got some housework done this summer, and it was not a contractor. It was a 504 number, but it was it just said, when I picked up, it said, "Stay on the line for a special virtual town hall with Congressman Steve Scalise." And I had heard from other people that they had been getting these calls, and I thought I was put on a do not call list because I said, I haven't gotten a call. No one's called me. And you have to pick up these calls when they come through. So if you don't pick up, it'll go straight to voicemail, but there's no callback number. There's no way to opt into this. It's not accessible. You just have to like be sitting by your phone when it comes, and you just don't know when it's good. And this was maybe like, I don't know, 4:30, 5 o'clock when the call came through. I mean, after the work,
weird.
It's weird. It's weird. And it's happened to other people, right? And it's just a randomized list. It's like a robocall. So I had heard about them. And so I stayed on the line. I stayed on the line, and
you and me, we're sickos. We're the kind of people that would do that.
No, I really wanted to ask my question, Jeff. I really
Of course. That's exactly what I mean.
This is important to me. So, okay, I stayed on the line, and then once the call started, it said, if you want to ask a question, I think select 1, and they'll put you through to the operator. So they're already screening the questions.
Right.
So I did get through to the operator, and I explained, I said my name, I said I was a constituent. And they said, well, what question do you want to ask? And I said, well, as a teacher, particularly special education, I want to ask what the congressman feels in terms of the Department of Education and what direction he thinks is going to head in, and where is his stance on it. So they did put me through. I was the first person to ask a question. I got to ask the question, and I mean, it was the same answer that anyone who's in support of the president gave. And he said that he wanted the education to be back to the states, which is what Linda McMahon is doing on her tour. And he said he supported President Trump's agenda for education. And that was really all I wasn't surprised, but that's what I needed to hear, because that to me is signifying that our representative is enabling what is happening, and it is not okay that that type of action, these type of actions are happening. So, you know, we've seen the cuts, and then this in the last 2 weeks, the cuts to OSEP, which is like 400 something positions. There have been over 350 organizations that have come out and have denounced this, because OSEP is responsible for, as I explained, getting the funding to the states, or from the federal government to the states. This is funding that helps provide the technical expertise, helps provide funding for positions, because special education involves teachers, it involves related service providers like speech therapists and OTs and all the extra supports that kids need. And then they're also responsible for compliance oversight. And in the state of Louisiana, we have had a lot of audits of our state Department of Education that have pointed to the fact that some of this has not gone well with accountability, in terms of abuse of kids, when we talk about seclusion and restraint, when we talk about implementation of IEPs, and when we talk about the complaint process that parents should be going through if they disagree with aspects of how the IEP is written, how it's going through, in terms of application. And so there's already been instances in this was when I was running for best seat. Those reports came out from 2023 to the end of 2024, these 3 reports. And then we're already under a consent decree in New Orleans. So to not have this oversight, this added layer of protection, these are civil rights violations for children. And these are things that parents, regardless of partisanship, because there are Republicans and no party and Democratic, like parents, families who have children with disabilities. These are parents that have fought for their children to have access to public education and have a fair and appropriate public education, right? We call that FAPE. They have fought for this. And so you are just letting this disintegrate years and years of advocacy. And so I see that as very problematic, because, like I said, every day I'm serving children like this. And for me, my concern is, well, if you don't have these things in place, on top of that, in September, you've already cut grants to universities, colleges that, in that state, like I think to 16 states that rely on this to help provide teacher training, all the things that go into having a qualified staff of special education professionals. It's only going to make our teacher shortages and vacancies worse. We're already dealing with it. And I have felt personally that if our congressman is enabling this type of stuff, and is coming after my job, my colleagues' jobs, working class people's jobs, like, it is only fair that we use our right and apply to run for Congress and do this job and fight for it, because you're not doing your job. Like, you're not protecting the rights of people. You're making life harder, because it is expensive, and it is stressful to be a parent with a child with a disability. They always have, you always have to advocate more. You always have to push for more. And they receive extra services that they rely upon that cost money, in order for their kid to make progress. So, I mean, hopefully that answers your question about the education thing. There's so much more with education, but I can speak from the special education perspective that's one small, tiny one aspect, but such a big problem.
It's one aspect. It's one tiny problem. And like I mentioned earlier, like, we're talking about the specific issues that are being created on education. And that is something that is being sort of like sloppily applied across the board, across of all areas of sort of governance, of essentially just deregulating it, sort of like taking it so that this sort of perspective, this 2025 2020, I'm sorry, what was it, the project 2025 perspective, and essentially deciding that this is the form. This is the shape of what we want the United States government to look like, and it is being sort of like thrust into that square hole, no matter what it looks like now.
Yeah.
And so when we see things like immigration and we see like huge crackdowns by ICE or whatever, that is to do sort of a very similar thing, which is to sort of create what this vision, which was, again, the ball was hidden, not particularly well, but it was hidden as an agenda by a lot of the people that did run for office in this previous term, and which does seem to be represented by the current occupant of congressional seat number 1, who's also happens to be the what is he? He's the Republican leader, or is he the whip?
He is the House Majority Leader.
Mm-hmm.
And
man, Louisiana is just like runs the House of Representatives somehow. How did that happen?
I've talked to folks, and they feel like, okay, we've got high leadership up there, but it's like, okay, we have to ask, okay,
what are they doing?
What is that in return, right? I think I've been teaching in the classroom for as long as our congressman pretty much has been in Congress. And no, I have not been in particularly an elected office, right? I've run for office locally and statewide. And I had some people approach me and say, well, why don't you run for a state legislative position? Because I feel that it is important that we have great legislators in our state House and state Senate. But we've, Jeff, you and I have talked about this as well, is like, you have to have a job, like, because our legislative spots in our state do not pay for it to, I couldn't be a teacher.
By design. That is by design. Like you cannot afford to live on the salary that you were given to be a state legislator, a legislator, I should say, which makes it so that the demands of the job to be a state legislator are pretty intensive and pretty full time. So what that essentially does is it gates who can be in those positions, who can hold those representative seats, because you got to make enough money, or you have to have this certain amount of independent comfort or safety or privilege or whatever, economic security, so that you can hold that position, or you just have to have just be on 24/7, which is just like seemingly impossible. And at least when it comes to the federal business, like that has you can actually make a living off of that.
Yeah, and I'm not getting in this race because it's like I'm looking for a new job.
Of course not. No. That's not what I'm implying at all, by the way.
I think for me, it's that, as I
don't know how you could be a teacher while also going to this special session that the governor just called. You know what I mean? Like, how is that possible?
Right. And there's been so
you have to tell your principal, like, oh, I'm sorry, I have to go to the special legislative session because the governor just called it. It's like, what the hell? Get the classroom.
Yeah.
Teach those kids.
There's been so many special sessions. So I mean, hats off to our legislators, like, from across the state, because they really have, like, it's been more than just the regular sessions that they've had to do. And I mean, but I'm not, the fact of the matter is that we know as teachers, our jobs are very difficult and they're not sustainable. And now we have people who are making choices, their choices, because they could make different choices, that are making this position ultimately more difficult. And I think it is to the demise, to point to the ultimate demise of public education, to make it so hard to be like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't, like, it's either like the people left behind have too much work, too bigger class sizes, bigger caseload sizes, not enough staff in the buildings. So it's either like we're burnt out for the ones who are staying here, or we're just like, okay, I hold up my hands and I can't do this anymore. I want to be able to go make changes so that it's not, my job's more sustainable and that I can come back to my job, right? I don't want to sit here and be in DC for like the duration of my life. Like,
Right.
like, and so I think term limits can be a good thing,
It sounds
because
like hell,
we,
quite frankly.
we have people who are not passing the torch over, and like, and so I would love to be able to come back to do my job, like, and because education is my passion and it's what I'm trained to do. But I I just don't see a pathway right now where like my job is going to get any easier if we allow this just continue to happen. And I just, I'm just going to stand up and say what I feel and advocate. And so to go back to what I was saying is, some people, suggested maybe you should do a lower level role. I'm like, well, I already ran for the Bessie board, which is a pretty large district. And while I might not have done what Mike Johnson did or Steve Scalise did in terms of being a state legislator first, because both of them were state legislators, and I might not have done that. But what I was doing when they were in the state legislature was getting my degrees, like in college, and then also ultimately like learning to be a teacher and be in the hallways of a classroom or a school, and comfort kids when they needed something during a tough moment, and to teach them how to read and teach them how to do math. And so while I might not be politicking in the halls of Baton Rouge, like I'm still having an impact of public service and doing it in that way, or driving the streets of like New Orleans, dropping off food to children who don't have enough food and are food insecure. And so I'm doing things in a different way. And I think we have to do things in a different way.
Well, we definitely need to do things differently. Like, I'm sorry, but like, if you're going to make the argument, if you're them, it's like, why aren't you doing this or that or the other thing that's like within this line is like, that has gotten to this place that we currently are. Like, F that. Look at where we're at. Look at the position that we're currently in. Why would I go through this process of this sort of like fake cursus honorum that you've like created that has put us in this position where we have, people being attacked by ICE at their court hearing for immigration, or you have cities under occupation by federal National Guard forces, or you have $800 million in Medicaid cuts. Like, it's just like, if you think that doing the same thing or going through this process that has like earned people the way that thing have gotten us to where we're at now, I'm sorry, F that. Like, throw that in the trash. That is no value to it. I'm sorry. There's useless.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean by doing something different. Why does it have to be this line of succession where you must be a state senator or a state legislator to then run. And I get it. It's also to prove like a viability of a candidate. But like, while I will say I have not won campaigns, I have certainly run campaigns, and we have a lot of people in elected office across this country who have never had to wage a campaign. And you know how important it is to me to have contests. And that's why, I got in the Bessie race. I didn't
make them earn it. They can't get it for free.
I didn't want to after running a whole race the year before, but I just believe in having that option, like at the voting booth. And so I think it's important that we not just count someone out and say, okay, they can't do it because they haven't proven that they can win. I think I know that people are looking for a different option. And when we have, 1 in 5 people in this state who rely on SNAP benefits, they're about to be cut on November 1st, and 45% of those of that 1 in 5 is children, and we have almost 50%, it's about like a little over 40% of people in this state relying on Medicaid, and these are the things that are being cut. We have to have someone who's going to be a fighter, and I get up every day and show up for my students and work hard for them and advocate for them. And that's what I want from my representative. I want someone who's going to show up and do the work and be accessible in and not just play this kind of, deal with this partisan theater, because that's what it feels like. And when I see my representative getting on like TV and speaking, it's a lot about defending like what the administration wants and not about what the voters and people who live in District 1 need, which is like protection from storms, expansion of the Affordable Care Act, which I will tell you is something that a lot of people in this district actually rely on and approve of. Or we have like the coastal master plan here in Louisiana, and that is pretty much approved of by most people, but we see it being defunded or done away with, right? We had the Barataria project that just got cut from the state. We have levee protections that are no longer happening. Part of the big beautiful bill is the cuts to NOAA. I mean, what are we doing here? So like you said, it's like if we keep doing the same thing and we keep voting in people who are allowing this to happen, it's enabling. It's a pathway to
regardless of how they get there, by the way, like regardless of their process by like, oh, I was a state senator and now I'm doing all these horrible things in Congress. It's like, oh, good for you, buddy. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, but like that whole argument is just like, I don't care.
30 years almost in elected office.
Like it's almost like, I'm sorry, but like if you are making that argument, you're making an argument for a career politician. And that is not like people don't want that. Like what? Like I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm like really getting fired up. I'm really getting like worked up about that. But like that whole like, oh, why weren't you a state senator first or whatever the hell is just like, that's just so stupid to me. You know what I mean?
I mean, I pondered about like running. I mean, people had approached me about running again for something, and people ask you like 2 weeks after you like lose a race, like, do you want to run again? And I'm like, what? I'm tired. And it's, I mean, and I'm speaking to people who've run for office, like who are listeners right now, because it's just, you just don't understand the experience till you've gone through it. And I have taken a lot of lessons. And I will say the biggest thing from both of those kind of campaigns is I really learned more about my community, and I learned more about how to better serve people. So, and I've always said, like, I don't have to be elected to serve. Like, I mean, I'm serving my community in many different ways, but like the ways in which I serve are now.
You're a school teacher. Of course you're serving your community. What the hell are you talking about? You know what I mean?
But even just like, I think about right now with the SNAP cuts coming, everything I'm seeing from the community is people like stepping up and saying like, oh, okay, we're going to do a food drive at this community event, and like people should give out more canned goods and things like that at Halloween. Like, instead of it, like, I saw someone say like, it's trick or treat, not trick or eat. Like, in fact, of like kids, like, like but people are very attuned to like, this is what's happening now. So they're pivoting in the way that they have to serve the community. And I had to adapt my approach of how I now look at and how I serve the community, and just in terms of my experiences running for office. And so I see this campaign as a way to provide people not only with an option, but like to engage with folks so that we can be better equipped to serve them, whatever happens in this race. Of course, we would love to be the representative, because I do feel that I am equipped with the skill sets to do it, whether I've served in elected office or not. Like, I am doing public service every day, and I have proximity to the real issues, like seeing kids that are hungry in my classroom, or hearing about my neighbors not being able to afford basic needs. I'm seeing that because I'm here. I'm committed, and we deserve somebody who is going to fight.
Hell yeah. So I guess sort of in the last couple of minutes, anything you want to sort of say as we kind of move our way, and where can we find information about your campaign?
I think I gave my website, but I'll say it again. www.laurenjewett.com is the website. We are actively planning. We have volunteer meetings, so you can sign up on the website. I know it's already been covered by some outlets, but I don't have the same level of money that my potential opponent is going to be bringing into this race. But I think this is an opportunity to build a campaign that is built among small donations, but also like donations that we are very thoughtful about accepting, because I'm not accepting like corporate money and all that. Like this is not about
it's a people run campaign.
This campaign is really, we like, why do we have we have billionaires, like we have people who like can't afford to purchase their groceries and like put gas in their car. Like that's a problem. Like this is something that, and I'm mindful of that. Like I understand that we have to be very good stewards of the money that people invest into this campaign. And so I'm looking for people to get involved and use and donate what they can, whether that looks like money or that looks like energy and time. I can't say that the election will be on April 18th. That's one last thing I probably want to say is we have a Louisiana special session going on right now. Our taxpayer money, taxpayer dollars are being used to have this special session. It ultimately is involving changing election dates to potentially be a month later. I guess May 16th is the proposed date in this bill. The session started last week. The session may last another 2 weeks, but that is going to impact the congressional primary. And so we don't know for sure when we will know if I am the Democratic nominee or not. So my encouragement is to email your legislators and tell them like how you feel about this special session, because ultimately the governor called it because we have a Supreme Court case being heard right now. Well, the oral arguments were heard on October 15th. And with that case, that could result in congressional redistricting. Like, so the lines may be redrawn of this district.
Which is like another huge factor when it comes to essentially justice and the Voting Rights Act and
yes.
Representation and we're actually seeing in the sort of broader sense, and this is a whole another episode, but we're seeing essentially red states versus blue states essentially organizing themselves in such a way that they are going to they're going to essentially stack the deck, each side in their favor as hard as they can. And it really is, when you think about the knock-on implications of that in a broader sense than what you're talking about, it really gives you sort of a sense of a divide in this country, and it's really, really terrifying. And I know we don't have time to talk about it because
but I mean, right now, like, it looks like the election will happen at some point in late spring. We're going to do what we do. We're still planning and working hard. And right now the district is made up of a lot of different parishes, mostly St. Tammany and Jefferson and Orleans. And then we got Lafourche and Plaquemines and Tangipahoa and St. Bernard, Ascension, St. Charles, Livingston. Like, we've got parts of those parishes too. So it's 10 parishes that we have right now. But if they're changing any lines in other districts, that could impact District 1. And so I just encourage people to stay informed and stay tuned, because this is a case of voter education and voter suppression that could be happening. And so we haven't printed any materials really yet, like push cards or things we would hand to voters, because oftentimes we want to put the voting dates on there, and we got to wait until that happens. So we're just actively trying to engage with the neighbors. If you want to sign up, like I said, go to the website, and we'll take you with open arms.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you. And go to laurenjewett.com to get more information. Thanks, as always, homie. It's always great talking to you. And thank you to everyone for listening. This is WHIVLP New Orleans. We love you. Bye-bye. Look at Mark Comrade. All right. Just give me 1 second. Make